this program. Our lecturer, Mr. Gleeson, has joined us. He's widely regarded as the best football commentator in Africa, and he's seen as one of the standard torchbearers of African football. We're very privileged to have him with us in our midst. He's here to deliver a very brief talk, and afterwards an interactive session will commence. Mr. Gleeson, we're very pleased to have you with us in our midst. Olubumi is the class captain for the day. Bumi, the floor is yours. Bumi, can you hear me?
Welcome, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Hello, hello. Greetings.
You're welcome to this class. We are so excited to have you here. We've read your profile and it's really intimidating. I'm the class captain of this class. So I would like you to go on with your lecture.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you very much for that very nice welcome, and to Sammy as well for inviting me to participate, and congratulations to you on all the wonderful speakers that you have had on this forum before. I'm going to turn on my video. I must apologize for two things. First of all, I had a better camera up previously so that you could see me, and we now, unfortunately, in the last 20 minutes or so, have what we call here in South Africa load shedding. You know, we have rolling electricity blackouts around about an hour or two every so often, once a day or twice a day, and it depends on where you live is where they switch off your electricity for an hour or two to save for the national grid. So where I am, excuse me, we are now without power. I have backup on my laptop and I have some backup on my router. So we should be okay for the next hour or so. But my picture's probably not very bright because my office is in darkness, or a little bit of natural light, but hopefully you can see me. So I apologize for that first. My second apology is for my croaky voice and the coughing that you will hear every now and then. Unfortunately, I'm suffering from a bit of bronchitis, but I hope that won't be an impediment. So yes, thank you very much. You call this a master class or a lecture. I'm a little bit intimidated by that tag. Master class is obviously quite boastful and very inaccurate in my case. But thank you very much for giving it such a high honor. I want to tell you a little bit about television commentary, and more specifically my take on it, because I don't think it is an exact art. I think it's a very personal thing, commentating, indeed broadcasting. It's so varied and so different and so completely different across the world that I don't think there is a sort of a, you know, it's not like becoming a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher where you follow a strict path or strict strictures to get you to your ultimate destination. I think broadcasting is very much a sort of a feel thing. It's a little bit of I think it's a little bit of a natural gift to be able to broadcast, and it's a little bit of a talent. And so not everybody can become a broadcaster, even those who really want to do it. I think you've got to have a little bit of that flair about you in order to get that, in order to get far in broadcasting or to become a broadcaster. So yeah, I think those who are hoping for a sort of a secret recipe on where, you know, the routes to take might be a little bit disappointed. I think a lot of it's got to do with being with luck, with being in the right place at the right time, etc. So I'll make a few points, if I may, and then I think let's have a Q&A session, and I'll be very delighted to excuse me, answer your questions. I presume I'm coming through okay at the moment.
Yeah, we can hear you very clearly, sir. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thanks, Sammy. Right, so broadcasting, as I say, is, it's a creative art, and therefore something that is not really structured along a certain path. I think you've obviously got to have a bit of a flair for speaking, and broadcasting is the basics. And without that, in my opinion, it's very difficult to embark on a broadcasting career. But there are many aspects to it. There are many styles, there are many approaches, and of course, many different kinds of audiences. And if I can maybe use my own country, South Africa, as an example, we have in television sports broadcasting, for example, two very distinctive styles for basically the English language and also for our vernacular languages. And we approach football broadcasting in particular completely differently. So in this country, obviously the English language work draws heavily on the influence of the UK and obviously the colonial ties and the heritage from British sports that we have in South Africa, and which I think most English-speaking countries in Africa have. And on the local language side, or vernacular language, if I may use that term, there is a completely different way of doing it. So it's very circumspect, fairly quiet in English, whereas in the local languages, football commentary is very entertaining. It's very loud. It's very noisy. It's imbued with a lot of language usage, terminology. There's a much higher tempo to the commentating. It's very excitable, and it speaks to a different kind of audience. And it's very interesting that you have these two parallels, that you have the sort of more staid, conservative way of delivering commentary, which you hear in the English-speaking world, and I'm sure all of you consume the Premier League or international tournaments in a sort of a British way. And then we have our local language style, which is completely different. And I can maybe compare it, for example, with Brazilian commentaries, the famous goal, which has, become worldwide, but that sort of excitable style that you have in the Latin American sphere is also very much what we have here in our local languages. And there's very much an audience for that. And with modern technology, particularly with satellite dishes, you can make a preference by using your decoder. You can choose whether you want to have the more boring English speaker like myself, or the more excitable local commentator, depending on whether that's your preferred language. And I think there's no right or wrong in this. I think at the end of the day, the audience decides which they enjoy and where they go. And as long as there's a market for both, I think there's no problem. There's no problem in them living side by side. Ultimately, the numbers count in television, and in our case, particularly with Supersport, where I work, it's very well monitored. The numbers are always available to the broadcaster. They obviously know who's watching, when they're watching, in what language they're watching, and so they're able to tell us, what's working and what's not working. My approach to commentary is based on a couple of ideas, or I should say dictates that I think are very important. First of all, when you're doing television, you must remember that you are talking to the viewer rather than the listener. And if I may explain the difference between the two, the viewer is obviously someone watching a screen and able to see the pictures unfolding in front of him or her. The listener is someone listening on a radio who needs to have a much more descriptive commentary and much more explanation of what is going around or what is happening, because they are not he or she is not able to see it. So, and I think that distinction is very, very important in sports broadcasting. If you are doing television, you need to be aware that your client or your viewer can see what's happening. So there's no point, for example, in saying things like the ball has just crossed the halfway line, or the cross is coming into the area, or the goalkeeper plucks it out of the air. That is all seen by the viewer, and it's a different style of commentating. In fact, perhaps a much easier style of commentating. Radio, in my opinion, is a lot more difficult. You've got to paint the picture to the viewer. You've got to tell him where the ball is, him or her. You've got to tell him where the ball is. You've got to tell them where the players are positioned on top of what's happening. And it requires, in my opinion, a much tougher discipline to be able to keep painting the picture for someone who can't actually see what's happening. They're completely and utterly dependent on you in providing a much clearer picture. And I think radio commentary is 10 times more difficult than television commentary because of that. In television, the basic principles, in my opinion, are information. So telling the viewer interesting things, setting the scene, explaining the context of the game that you are broadcasting on. Identification, I think, is probably your biggest task. Who's got the ball? Who are they? What are they doing? Where are they from? That kind of stuff. And just simple things like, a passage of play, you might only need 4 or 5 words as the ball is passed from one player to the next. So you'd say Okocha to Ulise, and then you just have to say Okocha. And when Ulise touches the ball, it's Ulise, and then Amokachi, and then nothing more than that is needed at times in television broadcasting, besides just identifying who the player is on the ball at the moment. So I think a bit of reflection is good. Stepping back a little bit from what's happening and just reflecting on what's happened perhaps in the last 10 or 50 minutes. Team X is dominating. They've been very strong on the wings. They're overloading that side and really putting pressure on their opponent, etc., etc. Always good to just step back from the immediacy of all the commentating and the identifying and the information, to just step back and reflect a little bit for the viewer, just put a bit of context in as well. And I think analysis also in television is a lot more important than perhaps in radio, when you also analyze the play and how things are going, and you provide a little bit more of a sort of an intellectual, cerebral view on the game, which is perhaps lacking in radio, because in radio, the poor commentator is just having to describe the whole time where the ball is, who's running on, what the play looks like, where the possession is, on top of already who all the players are. So that is a massive difference, in my opinion, between television and radio. And if you're doing television, you don't need to talk as much as you might perhaps be inclined to do. And I think a lot of commentary that I listen to in Africa in particular is it's not bad, but it could be a lot better with silence, which is actually quite ironic. But you don't need to be continually talking. And the more you talk, the more oftentimes you dig yourself into a little bit of a hole. So silence sometimes with television speaks 1,000 words. The image is there for the viewer. You must never forget that the viewer can see what's happening. He needs addendums to the picture he's seeing. So he needs a bit of information, a bit of context, a bit of analysis, a bit of identification. Does not need to be told that that is a cross into the area, or the goalkeeper's plucking the ball out of the air. He can see that. He can see the ball's crossing the halfway line, or he can see where the ball is, for example. You often hear commentators on television say, ball is still in Nigeria's half of the field. So we can see it's in Nigeria's half of the field. There's no need to tell us that. Yeah, so I think those are the fundamentals of television commentary, and you've got to be cognizant of the fact that it's very different from radio commentary. However, on the African continent, particularly with an older generation, I think most people grew up in an era before there was a lot of access to live local football on television. And therefore, they come from a background of having followed the sport on radio and being used to a higher tempo of commentating, a bit more of a noise level, a bit more of an excitement level, and they quite like that on television as well. And that it works very well here in South Africa, particularly in the local languages. The commentators we have in the Zulu language or Tswana, for example, on SuperSport, get very good audience numbers. They are very popular, and they do commentating in a particular style, a very popular style, and it's been very successful. So, as I said, in my opinion, there's no right or wrong. I think each person who goes into broadcasting should strive to be a little bit different, to have a little bit of a different style, to be a little bit not part of a pack. You don't want to sound like everybody else. You want to be a little bit different. And I think that's something you've also got to strive a little bit for. Other basics, I think, for television commentary are command of the language. I think sometimes it's difficult to listen to a commentator who is not proficient in the language in which he's speaking. In other words, using the wrong idioms or the wrong expressions. I've heard silly things like, the famous expression, it's all over bar the shouting. Sometimes you hear it's all over the bar shouting. The person doesn't really understand the idiom or the expression and uses it in the wrong context and basically makes a little bit of a fool of themselves. So it's important, I think, to have a good command of the language, whatever language that you are broadcasting in. It is nice on the ear when you are listening to someone who is very proficient in the language. I would use the example, and I'm sure many of you know the English commentator Peter Drury, whose command of the language and his expressions and stuff, you can see the man is very well prepared, are really super and really pleasing to the ear when you listen to his commentary. I think that's important, the command of the language. Excuse me again. I think other things that you've got to do, other things that are key in commentating are research. Vital part of commentating is the knowledge that you are able to impart. I often use the example of people sitting in the pub. If you listen to guys in a pub talking about sports, they are often almost trying to outwit each other or out-knowledge each other with facts about sports. Did you know, for example, that so-and-so is about to score his 100th goal, or this guy's just been transferred from club A to club B for 50 million pounds. That kind of, those little facts are greatly loved by sports followers. And so it's important to empower people with that. And I think as a successful commentator, the more little nuggets of information that you can pass on to the viewer to actually make him smarter when he's now then talking to his friends in the pub is important. So your research has really got to be top quality. Our problem in Africa is we have a lack of our own statistics. I mean, there are many countries where you don't even know who is the most capped player from the national team or who scored the most goals, how many caps a player has got who's playing for the national team, or indeed how many appearances he's made in the leagues and stuff. So those kind of statistics are important to gather if they're not available, to keep yourself and then to use. Milestones in sport are always important to celebrate. When a person plays his 100th game or scores his 100th goal, just as an example, these are all little milestones that people like to see, like to be part of, like to follow. And it's important to have that statistical research. You've got to know the players that you are describing. You've got to know something about them. You've got to know something about them that the public doesn't know about, more importantly. It's very easy these days to, I'll just use Nigeria as an example. You know, if Nigeria was playing a friendly against South Africa, for example, and I was asked to commentate it, your first point of reference is, once you get the squad list, is to go to something like Google, for example, or Wikipedia, and find out some basic facts about the player. And those forums, Wikipedia in particular, will give you a decent amount of information about a more established player. But you must remember, all of that stuff is available to the public. What would set you apart as a better broadcaster from your colleagues, excuse me, would be little bits of information that are perhaps not that well known. And that takes research, that takes effort, that takes trying to find information, making phone calls, interviewing people, trying to get extra little bits of information that you can add to your broadcast that just make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more exciting. So research is huge, and research is not just doing your homework on the internet. It's in my opinion, it's talking to people, trying to get interviews, phoning, just doing some good old-fashioned journalistic legwork. Television is a great door opener, I found. You know, as a television commentator, people are happy to talk to you, even to the extent, certainly in our domestic league here in South Africa, we have our accreditation from the broadcaster allows us to go onto the field. So I make it a point myself to be at the match or to be at the stadium before the teams arrive, and they traditionally arrive about 90 minutes before kickoff. So I would get there before that, so that when they come out, you know, normally the teams get off the bus and they almost immediately walk onto the pitch, sometimes just have a little bit of a walk around. That's when they are at their most relaxed. And if you position yourself and you have access on the side of the field or at the tunnel where they're coming out, you often get then to speak to the players and the coaches almost immediately and get a sense of, you know, how they're doing, or how so-and-so's injury, are you feeling today, or what's happening with your knee, you know, just little bits of information that are going to make your broadcast in 90 minutes time a lot better. And it's not always everybody who gets that opportunity to do it, but if you are working for a big excuse me, a big television house, you'll find that doors are open to you. Accreditation does allow you access. You've got to grab that access. You've got to grab that opportunity and get out there and collect information. So yeah, research, just knowing a little bit more about your subject than Joe Public is very, very important, because these days, you know, the internet is such a wonderful tool, but everyone has access to it. So most football fans know everything they need, everything that they possibly can about the big stars of today's football. If you can find a little bit more information, that just makes your broadcasters that little bit more special. So information and research is absolutely vital in the game. And then, of course, you've got to have good knowledge of your particular sport. I'm not a great fan of broadcasters who do multiple sports. I think that's impossible, in a sense, that you cannot be a master of one, and I mean a master of all trades. It's impossible to have a command of knowledge of many sports that sets you up as a good broadcaster. I think it's probably better to stick to one sport. Obviously, football is the sport in terms of television hours and time. That's the number one. And I'm a big sports fan. I love basketball and tennis and rugby, etc. And I think I could maybe commentate them, but I would never do so, because I don't really have a decent knowledge of the little intricacies of all of those sports to be able to make me sound good. I think I would make a fool of myself. So I stick to what I know, which is football, and I think it's just a little bit safer. That I don't think it's possible for a broadcaster to really do more than one sport and to be at the top of his trade. Yeah, so that's, it's broadcasting is not, or television commentary is not really a science. It's in my career has been very much hit and miss, a couple of lucky breaks along the way. And I think most people who've got into a similar position will be able to tell you similar stories. There's no set path. Those of you who want to do it, it's obviously quite a closed sphere. There's not that much in the way of work. I presume most of you in Nigeria, for example, there's not many games that are broadcast, so there's obviously not a lot of television broadcasting work available. So it's a very cutthroat and competitive market, and very difficult to break down doors. I always tell people who want to get in the game that you take your first rejection and come back. Take your second rejection, keep coming back, keep pounding on the door, keep knocking, keep trying to see the decision makers. Persistence is actually not a bad thing. It's you might think you might be irritating the person, but I think people also admire people who are confident, who are persistent, and who really have a self-belief, and eventually, with enough knocking, I think you can force yourself an opportunity at least be heard. And then, of course, your natural talent must come out, your broadcasting ability, and these extra things like research and knowledge, etc. Try and let that shine. But African football at the moment, there are not a lot of television opportunities. It is a little bit of a pity. Let's see what happens with this supposed African Super League, whether that allows opportunity for more commentators. I do think that it's one of the tragedies of the coverage, for example, of the Cup of Nations or the club competitions, particularly the Champions League group phase, that we have to listen to a lot of British voices commentating on our African matches. That's going to change in the next few years. I think CAF have realized that it's not a good thing to have all these British commentators in Paris commentating on Champions League matches, that they've got to get some more African voices. And I think there's a genuine effort now to find African broadcasters for African sports events. You've got to fish where your market is, and I think CAF are realizing that. So yeah, if there's any questions, I'd be very happy to try and answer them to the best of my ability.
Hello, sir. I want to interject here. Somebody's mic is not muted and is interfering with the lecture. So please, Owolobi, please mute your mic. Thank you. If you have any questions to ask, please, we'll do it in the normal fashion. You raise your hand and you get picked one by one. Thank you.
So I presume you're going to do the picking, right? Okay, maybe I should. Yeah, then, oh, there we go.
Olisa, go ahead and ask your question, please.
There we go.
Olisa, unmute your mic. Go ahead with your question.
Good day, Mr. Gleeson. It's a pleasure having you lecture me. So I want to ask, what was your motivation as a young man to be a successful commentator as you are?
I got to be honest with you. I got a little bit lucky, and it wasn't really my first choice. It wasn't really I'm a journalist by trade, and I still regard myself as a journalist number one and a commentator number two. But I got a little bit lucky and it's a very long, boring story that I'm going to just précis for you. But in 1990, when Cameroon did so well at the World Cup, South African sport at that time was still isolated because of apartheid. But South African television was showing the World Cup for the first time live with all of the matches. And I had already done quite a bit of reporting on African football. I traveled outside of South Africa, particularly to neighboring countries like Botswana, Swaziland, Lesotho, Mozambique, etc. To whenever big African teams came to those to play club matches or national team matches, I would go and watch and meet people and educate myself about African football. So I had a little bit of a reputation as a newspaper man who knew a little bit about African football, not much, in 1990, in a country where we were still isolated from African sport. So I was a little bit lucky in that I had this, let's call it a journalistic advantage. So when Cameroon did so well at the 90 World Cup in Italy, you'll remember they reached the quarterfinals. It was the first African team to do so. It was obviously a big deal throughout the continent, but it was a big deal also on South African television. And they invited me to come to the studio to explain about Cameroon and the team and who the players and why are they doing so well. Everyone was very surprised with how well they were doing. And so that gave me my first television exposure as a newspaper man. And from that, they invited me back, and eventually I moved into commentating matches. But it was a lucky break, and I have to be very grateful to the indomitable Lions of 1990, because perhaps if they hadn't done well and they'd been beaten in the first game by Argentina instead of winning it, etc., I might not have had that break. And that's just a little bit of how the roll of the dice is sometimes. You know, you have to grab those opportunities. So I'm very grateful to the Indomitable Lions. They were a big help to me, and obviously a wonderful, proud moment for African football, but for me personally, a super motivator in my early days of my television career.
Thank you very much, sir. Sam Victor, please go ahead with your question.
Okay. Good day, Mr. Gleeson. My name is Sam Victor Joseph. I just want to ask, please, what has been your biggest challenge since you started commentating?
Biggest challenge, do you say?
Yes, sir.
It's a tough question on a Friday afternoon. Listen, I think these days for media practitioners, life has become a lot easier, internet has helped a lot in terms of information gathering. And, these days when you go to big tournaments, for example, there's a lot of access, informal scenarios with coaches and players, press conferences, mixed zones, etc. It's a lot more organized, the interaction between media and the protagonists, the players and the coaches. So perhaps the biggest challenge was in the early days of my career, where you had to kind of knock on doors yourself. There was nothing, there weren't organized press conferences. There was no team sheet with dates of birth on, just to give you a simple example. One would have to go and collect them all yourself. That was a bit tedious, but at the same time, it was also a very good exercise. It meant that you met more people, you put yourself out a little bit more. People get to know you, they see your interest, and they appreciate it. So, but yeah, I suppose the biggest challenge was more in the beginning of my career, in a different era, when collecting information was quite tough. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. For those who are just joining us, this is a special session, and the lecturer today is Mr. Mark Gleeson, foremost African football commentator. We have participants from all over the world. For those who are not familiar with how this works, the lecture is over officially, but this is the interactive session. So if you have a question for Mr. Mark Gleeson, let's know via an emoji. You just raise your hands, and we're going to pick you. The reason why we do this is because we want to be as organized as possible. I can see some hands up. Patrick Ondo Metogo, the floor is yours. Go ahead with your question for Mr. Gleeson.
Thank you so much for giving me the floor. Patrick Ondo is actually an interpreter from Gabon, and I was very happy. I was very pleased to meet Mr. Gleeson in Gabon during the AFCON 2017 when I was covering the pre and post conference press conference matches. So I have two questions for Mr. Gleeson. First of all, I want to know, did you have to go to some training, to undergo some training to have the voice that you actually have? Because actually, even in interpretation, the voice is very important, as it can make people feel more comfortable when they hear you. So this is the first question. The second question is, you talked about, you said you prefer to stick, you are a sport lover, but you prefer to stick to what you know, which is actually football. Of course, you could comment on cricket or basketball and so on. You prefer to stick to football, which you best know. I know terminology is most of the time a challenge. I also know that the rules, knowing the rules can be very helpful for a commentator. So actually what I want to know is, how do you prepare your commentaries when you are taking part to a game or a competition? How do you prepare your commentaries? Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. I must say I remember you quite distinctly, in fact, because it's very rare at Cup of Nations tournaments and CAF events that they have interpreters with any talent, and you were certainly one very talented. I remember you distinctly as a man who knew football terminology and was able to correctly translate, particularly, from French into English and backwards and back. So nice to hear from you, and thank you very much for your questions.
Thank you.
The first one about training, no training. That's my point. There are broadcast schools. I'm a skeptic about that. I think broadcasting, the ability to talk, the ability to have what the Irish call the gift of the gab, is a natural thing. You get some guys who talk, and you get some guys who don't talk, and you get some people who are very good with mimicry or telling jokes, and that's a little bit of flair, and I think that's the first thing to do broadcasting. If you don't have that, it's very difficult to go and sit in front of a microphone, be it on the radio or on the television. So, and I think that's the basic premise. Then you build the rest. You build the rest in terms of your knowledge about your subject, and that comes to your second question about sticking to football. As you say, I'm a 100% believer. You ask, how do I prepare for a game? These days, I'm a little bit lucky in that, as I said earlier, I'm a football journalist. So football starts for me at 7 in the morning and ends, 7 or 8 at night. So I'm doing it all the time. So I don't have to perhaps do as much studying and homework for a particular match as maybe some of my colleagues who do other things in the week before football commentary on the weekend. For me, I'm immersed in it all the time. So I might, for example, I'm doing 2 matches this weekend in the South African League. I've been thinking about these games since Monday, and I've been writing about them. I've been talking to the coaches. I've been listening to the interviews of the players that they've given on different radio stations. And I've been going through each player, making notes about them. If you give me half a second, I'll show you. I don't know if you can see, but I use a piece of paper like that, like it's just a card paper, and I write the 11 players on the sheet. I see. I might have an example here for you. Here we go. So I prepare like something like this with the players. I think, I'm not sure if it's upside down or not, but they're my 11 players. I use different color pens, and I put a little bit of facts and figures about each player underneath his name. So you'll see the number, the player's surname, and then just a few facts. It's very untidy in my own little scrawl. But the idea is that I just have this card now in front of me when I'm commentating, and I can look up and down all the time. I'm watching the game. I'm seeing the number of the player who's got the ball, and I'm able to look at my my notes here and give you a little bit of information or a little fact that I've written down that I've researched during the week. So it does take a few hours for each game to put these cards together. And obviously, when you're putting the card together, the stuff is going into your brain. So sometimes you don't really even need it. It's more a discipline. And you are able to remember that. And as soon as the guy touches the ball or something particularly happens, it jogs your memory, and you're able to then recall a little bit of information for the audience. So yeah, it's a fair amount of preparation for each game. And then at the match, as I said earlier, I like to go early. I like to always speak to the coaches. Basic questions: who's injured? What's been happening? When did you fly in, or how did you come by bus? Where did you stay? Did you train maybe before the match if you're the visiting team? Simple stuff, that might give you just one or two little bits of information that just make it a little bit more interesting for the audience. Particularly, I think you must know who's injured, who's out. You must know each team, what the tactical changes might be. So, for example, Patrick, if you were the center forward and you were injured for the week, I should know that you might be doubtful for the game, and who possibly could take your place, or what options there are available to the coach if you are not playing. That kind of stuff, I think, is also important. It's all you need to put in some decent preparation, and you can hear commentators who haven't done their homework. You can hear they've got one or two little bits of information. They repeat them ad nauseum 4 or 5 times in a single broadcast. You hear the same information. That's someone who hasn't really done his homework. You must have a fair amount of good stuff available for you to talk about in the game. Quite a lot of information, in fact.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I'm very happy to hear it from a professional like you, because even we in interpretation, I think preparation is the key. And I'm very happy because I remember that just after the football AFCON, Gabon also organized the handball competition, African Cup of Nations, and I was also the interpreter for that competition. So I had to go into deep preparation, knowing the terminology of handball, which is not the same thing as in football, also the rules, because it's very, very difficult, as you rightly said, that when a commentator did not really do his assignment, his homework, it's very easy to see it. And I'm very happy that you, as a professional, you are a model for us, and we want to follow your steps. Thank you so much for that, Mark.
That's kind of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the next question. Let's hear from Treasure Odede. Treasure, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mark Gleeson. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. You're a world-class sports journalist, and particularly, I'm not really a sports enthusiast, but I've learned quite a lot from your talk so far. Firstly, I would like to know, how does one get to the level of being relevant in the broadcasting scene globally? How does one get to the level of being relevant globally? Okay, that's one. And I read up a little on your profile, and I got to know that you are an archivist for FIFA. I'm just getting to know that there's actually a job like that in journalism. I would just like to know a bit about what that entails. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So how do you become relevant? That's very, very difficult. I mean, when you say relevant, you mean how does one get to work for something that's hugely international? What are you talking about? That is sort of like a CNN or something like? Is that what you mean? Am I understanding your question correctly?
Very well, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I mean, there is no clear path. It's not like becoming a doctor. To become a doctor, my daughter is a doctor. You have to go to university for X number of years. Then you have to do your housemanship. Then you have to do some community work, and then you become a doctor. And it's a very clear path. You study this in year one, you study that in year two. Broadcasting and journalism in a way also has a little bit of a path, in the sense of you should have some sort of good tertiary education, particularly in the arts, history, that kind of languages, that kind of thing. And then you can, journalism, there's a lot of good courses and studies. Broadcasting, in my opinion, is a little bit more different. It's much more hit and miss. It's very dependent on the personality. The guys who are really successful broadcasters, television personalities, just have, and I'm thinking about, famous people in the States, for example. I think about our own Trevor Noah, comedian / TV host. He's just got a gift that the rest of us would just love to have. He's got a way of speaking, a way of thinking, humor, wonderful view on the world, take on the world. That's almost a God-given talent. It's unique. I don't want to say to you that unless you've got something like that, you're not going to make it in broadcasting. But I do want to say that to get to places like the top of the television tree, I think is very much dependent on the right opportunities at the right time, etc. That there's no clear path that if you do A, you're going to get to B, you're going to move on to C and D. No, that's not how it works in broadcasting. A lot of it is hit and miss. And for those who are really, really determined, you've got to take a few knocks along the way and just keep bouncing back and trying your utmost to open a little bit of the door so that you can walk in and take your place. So it's not a very helpful answer. I do apologize. The thing about the Archivist, I think you were reading something on Google, which is not, I used to help FIFA with the statistics. I used to keep the caps, particularly of African players. And at one stage, it's only been in the last 10, maybe 15 years that FIFA have made a proper effort to catalog football, to keep lineups, to keep lists of caps, etc. They have quite a good department now doing that. But before that, they had to rely on guys who were doing it privately, like myself, and other people like Frank Simon, for example, I think is on this broadcast as well. Very, very good French journalist who would also have wonderful records and statistics of African football that he would have collated and kept himself by just hard, diligent work. And at one stage, a little bit before the computer era as well, those statistics were not kept by FIFA. So I was a supplier to them of information that they really should have had themselves. But an archivist for FIFA, that's not strictly true. I was just I was giving them statistical information on African footballers, basically. But I haven't done that for a good decade or so now.
Okay, we still have some few questions. Let's go with Nema Basi Gospel, please. If you can hear me, unmute your mic.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Mark.
Hi.
Hi, sir. So I just want to ask this question, please. Between word pronunciation, tonation of the voice, and having your facts correctly, and also pronunciation of players' name correctly, which should a commentator prioritize? Hello?
If you can, I would say all of them, you know. Pronunciation is important, and it means a lot to people. You know, I'm not very good at it, to be honest with you, and I struggle, and I do take some criticism for it, and I accept it, you know. And I think that's also part of your research, you know. If you are, I'll give you an example there. I presume I'm guessing now, but from your name, are you Ghanaian? Are you from Ghana?
No, sir. I'm a Nigerian.
Okay, my apologies. I was going to use an example of a Ghanaian player called Cherry, who plays in the German league, and I'm not sure my pronunciation is still right, but when I first saw the name, I thought, oh, I don't know how to pronounce this, and I'm going to be commentating on a match involving this player in a few hours' time. And luckily for me, I have a number of friends who I can phone up. And these days, with WhatsApp, I mean, life is so much easier. Can you imagine if I wanted a pronunciation of your name, for example? I could just send you a quick WhatsApp and say, hey, do me a favor. Can you just give me a voice note? Just say your name 3 or 4 times on a voice note, send it back to me. And I can then listen and get the correct pronunciation, the correct intonation of how to correctly pronounce your name. So those who make a lot of pronunciation errors, I think, are lazy. But I will be the first one to put up my hand and say, sometimes I really struggle with it. Sometimes it's a problem with the tongue, but these days, you should be able to pronounce everybody's name correctly. You know, the famous pronunciation debacle, in my opinion, is an African one. It involves the first Premier League, the first African to play in the Premier League, the 30 years. You know, this year they're celebrating 30 years of the Premier League in England. The first African to play in the Premier League was Peter Ndlovu from Zimbabwe. He was playing for Coventry City. In the UK, for some reason, they all called him Ndlov instead of Ndlovu. And somewhere along the line, someone at the BBC misheard it, and they made that was the rule. This guy's name was Ndlov. That's how you pronounce it. And Peter is such a nice guy and such a quiet and humble man that he never really complained about it. But for his entire career in England, and it's really a tragedy, you know, he was known as Peter Ndlov when he's actually Peter Ndlovu, which is a very common surname in Southern Africa. And every time Southern Africans would have heard this horrible mispronunciation of the name, of course, they would have rolled their eyes in exasperation and been irritated with the commentator. So I think all of those things you mentioned are a priority, but pronunciation is important. And it's an emotive thing as well. You know, if I'm doing a match with the Nigerian national team and I mess up Nigerian names, you as a Nigerian viewer are not going to be happy with me. I'm going to upset you. I'm going to irritate you while you're sitting in front of the television. And that's something that, you know, a broadcaster must be very cognizant of. You don't irritate your audience, because enough irritation means lots of complaints, and then you're going to lose your job. And one of those things to avoid irritation is to make sure you get the pronunciation correct.
Okay, before the class captain goes on, Mr. Gleeson, thank you very much. I regret to inform us that I will be temporarily stepping away from the room because I have a live program on radio. I'm actually inside the studio as I speak. I've been multitasking with my production, and my live program kicks off in the next 5.5 minutes or thereabout. So I'll be stepping aside briefly, but as soon as my program is over, I'll rejoin the class. But the class goes on. So Mr. Gleeson, my deepest apologies, but the class captain was standing in my stead. Class captain, please go ahead with organizing the question and the answer session.
Okay, we still have some questions here. We'll take some of you and then go to the chat box. Christiana Zulu, if you can hear me, please unmute your mic and go ahead with your question.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to find out two things, if that's possible. For a start, I'm in a place where I'm being given an opportunity to do broadcasting with, I could call it some station. It's TV broadcasting, but it's on sports, mainly football. And sometimes I don't know where to get information because we lack, maybe we could say, a database. So how do you get information that can set you apart from what maybe Wikipedia would give you? I heard you mention you can get something from the internet, but where can you get information that can set you apart prior to a match? And for someone who's starting and with not much information, what's the best way to prepare for set, whether you're going to be a presenter or an analyst or a commentator? Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. I'll deal with your second question first about, and I think those are all three very different roles. You know, presenter is not necessarily someone who is a journalist with the job of imparting knowledge. I think sometimes a presenter doesn't really need to be much more than, you know, hopefully a good-looking face that is capable of introducing things and asking questions and letting the debate flow. So I think that's a completely different skill. You need a wonderful ability to react with the camera, and that also is a unique talent. You know, there's not many people who when they talk to the camera, which is quite a soulless thing, you know, you're just talking to this object, are able to communicate in a way like they're talking to their grandmother in a room or to their closest friend. It really is. I admire greatly some of the wonderful presenters that I've seen in my time, and the way they are able to talk to this cold camera looking at them. And it is, you know, if you're ever in a studio, it's quite a soulless place, and they come across with such warmth and really make you feel so comfortable. So that is a completely different skill. And the same really for an analyst. You know, an analyst, just as an aside now, I've had many analysts working with me, commentating. Most of them have been ex-players. And when they start, of course, they're very nervous. And some of them come with wads of paper, you know, lots of information. They've obviously done homework the whole week. They've been sweating on this first game. And I say to them, listen, put that stuff away. You are an analyst because you have played, most of them, as I say, are ex-footballers, because you've played the game at a much higher level than us broadcasters and us mere mortals, the audience. So sit back, watch the game, and then as you see things unfold, tell us about them, because you are looking at them, you are looking at it with the eyes of expertise that none of us have. Your eyes are so much sharper. You are much more capable of seeing things developing or unfolding on the football field that we are not capable of seeing. So relax. Don't worry about facts and figures and trying to be smart. Just watch the game and tell us what's happening in your own words, and you will find that what you think might be perfunctory or simple is actually quite revealing to us, because we didn't know that, you know. And I work with some analysts where I walk out of the commentary box at the end of the game and I'm always feeling like, wow, I didn't know that. You know, he would have said one thing in the game, just one little thing. And I would think to myself, wow, that's cool. I didn't know that at all. I didn't think of that at all. That's something I didn't know before. You want to feel like the analyst is just adding something really special on top of the broadcasting. So the commentator is doing the shouting and the identification and giving the tempo and making the noise, and the analyst must come in and just give words of wisdom and analysis of what's happening. He doesn't have to be smart and clever with facts and figures, and just has to interpret what's happening on the field. Explain to us why, for example, the ball is breaking down and the midfield, nothing's happening. There seems to be a change of possession all the time. No one's really being able to hold the ball and pass it around. A good analyst will come and say, hey, you can see there are too many players in the midfield. It's a bit overloaded. Both teams are starting with a 3-5-2 formation. You've got 10 people in the midfield. That's why no one's able to really get their foot on the ball and pass it around. There's not enough space. The pressing is high, just stuff that he can see because he has played at that level. He's got an eye for the game that we don't have because we haven't been professional sports people. So, yeah, analysts, I think, is also a completely different game. And then your first question about going into the broadcasting and what do you do in a situation where there's not enough information, I think is a very good question, and it's very important. And I think it's quite simple. And I'll tell you what I would have done, or what I did in my day before you had internet and resources, and in an era when there weren't databases, which is probably what you are facing. Judging by your name, are you from Zambia, for example?
Yes, I'm from Zambia. Yes.
Okay, great. I think I've met you, have I not?
No, we haven't met.
Okay, sorry. Yeah. But anyway, I understand your dilemma in Zambia. There's not a great database, particularly on the local league. So if you have the time, and you've got to make the time, and you're doing a match on Saturday between Zanaco and Zesco, in my day, I would go to the hotel or the base or the training session in the week before the game. And I would find someone that I could sit with within the team. And sometimes it can be the team doctor, or it can be one of the assistant coaches, or even the kit man, and say, okay, let's go through the team. Can you tell me something about every single player? Like just something like, okay, tell me about the goalkeeper. And I'll say, well, he works for the post office, and he only comes to train twice a week because he's very busy. But he's very dedicated, blah, blah, blah. Those little nuggets of information that you get are just wonderful for a broadcast, But you've actually, in your country, I think you're a little bit unlucky because a lot of that stuff is not available. You've actually got to do the hard yards. You've got to go to the training or the hotel the day before or the morning of the game and just get someone to help you with a little bit of information about every single player, so that when you sit down to broadcast the game, you have got something on every player. You can tell the audience something about each player that the audience did not know before. And you will come out of that broadcast with flying colors. People will say, wow, that was a good commentary, because all of that stuff I didn't know before. I had no idea that this guy was a postman, or he worked in the bank, and he only trained twice a week. That is, what a good goalkeeper. He must be so talented, etc., etc. Just, you really got to go and do the hard yards. And you will find maybe, in the beginning, people are a little bit reluctant to talk to you. And I think for a woman also, it's tough, I appreciate that.
Yeah, very true.
But you really got to be persistent, and I think after a while, and it won't take long, people will admire, first of all, understand what you want and why you're doing it. And then B, they will admire you for your thoroughness. And you will find very, very quickly that perhaps cold response you get initially will change very quickly into a very warm response. And people will go out of their way to help you because they understand what you are doing is really above and beyond the call of duty. So I would encourage you before your big match that you get, you'll know when you're doing a big match. Go and do go to the training sessions or go to the hotel or see somebody who can help you, and try and get little bits of information about the club and about the coach and about each of the players. Just set yourself above the rest of the pack.
Thank you so much.
Good luck.
Okay, because of time, we'll take 2 more questions and then go to the chat box. If I call your name, please, you have to go straight to the point and be fast with your question. Abiaze Melissa, please, once again, you can unmute your mic.
Good day, sir. I want to ask another question. So, my question is, as a commentator over the years, what is the most important thing that you have singled out that this is key to actually be successful?
Research, I would say. Research is the best thing. Having information that the viewer does not have, to be able to tell the guy or girl who's listening to your broadcast something that he doesn't know. If, for example, you were describing Okocha and you said he played in the Bundesliga once for Eintracht Frankfurt, everybody knows that. Try and find something about him that people don't know. Little bits of added information above the ordinary. Try and take yourself away from the general crowd and lift yourself one level higher. That's what I would say.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So let's go to the chat box. I'll read some questions out for you.
Okay, should I?
This one says, sir?
Sorry, go ahead.
This one says, in commentary, I know choosing the right words at the right time is key. How does one manage to learn and master this, like Peter Drury, you, and some other great ones out there? And what advice do you have for the young generation on this?
Yeah, this speaks to command of the language, and I mean, I would not put myself anywhere near the same category as Peter Drury as a wonderful command of the English language. Whatever language you are broadcasting in, I think you have to have some sort of proficiency in it. And I suppose a lot of that comes from talking, speaking, talking, broadcasting. You improve over time. Reading is important, listening to others, listening to good radio and listening to good television. And I'm not talking only sports. There's so much good content now where people speak well, and we can steal and learn and listen and take from the examples that they set us. I don't know. I mean, I also recommend listening to good podcasts, also for a feel of language. But again, I also feel it's a little bit of a flair thing. You've got to have a little bit of a flair for language. You get some people who just speak better than others. And I mean, Peter Drury obviously works hard on it because he's got a lot of prepared stuff. You can hear he's prepared very well. But he's a master of language. And I think ultimately it's a little bit of a flair that he's got. God has given him a talent.
Okay, on to the next one. This one is coming from John Peters. Good day, sir. Does one need a special voice training to be able to make it in good commentary?
Well, with all the coughing and spluttering that I've delivered to you today, I don't think I should answer that at all. I don't think so. No, I think, and voice is not that important. There are a couple of great commentators who have been gifted with beautiful voices, and radio broadcasters, talk show hosts, etc. That they are in a very small category. There are a lot of us, I would say, in a just a normal band. I don't consider myself to have a voice at all, in the sense of the way I sound is appealing. I would like to think it's what I say is more appealing. So I would say, no, you don't have to have special voice training. I think if you have a high squeaky voice, it's going to be a bit of a problem because that might be a little bit annoying to the audience, but you can overcome that with your delivery, with what you say, with the information that you bring to the broadcast. I think voice training is not a higher priority in TV sports broadcasting.
Okay, sir. But before you go, let's take some few, just few.
I'm happy to, no problem.
Sir? Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear. No, I couldn't hear you there for a while. I'm not sure anybody else could. But I'll tell you what, I can see these questions in the chat as well. So maybe just to speed it up, let me go through them with you.
Okay, sir.
With your permission.
Better.
The next one says, what do you recognize as the high point of your career? And I don't really have an immediate answer for you. I've been to one or two really fantastic matches. I was very lucky to be in Atlanta, for example, where Nigeria beat Argentina in that fabulous medal match. I was there in Seoul when Senegal beat France in the opening game of the World Cup in 2002. You remember France were the defending champions. It was a wonderful day for African football. Obviously, from a more parochial and nationalistic point of view, I was there when South Africa won the Nations Cup in '96, beating Tunisia in the final tournament, unfortunately, that Nigeria didn't come to, or maybe luckily for us, Nigeria didn't come and participate in. So I've had a lot of wonderful experiences. To pick out a high point would be really, really tough. I think the high point has been going to a lot of the big tournaments. I've been to the World Cup since 1986. I've been to the Nations Cup since Senegal 92 was my first one. So I've had a lot of opportunity. I'm very grateful for those that sent me there on assignment and being able to be at all of these wonderful tournaments. And I think that's also very important for young journalists. You've got to try and get to these events. You know, there's nothing like being there. You can't, watching it off the TV screen is not the same as being there. It's very, very important. Then someone says, how, with so many coaches and players, how do you keep all this information at your fingertips without making mistakes on air? I'm the first to say that I make a lot of mistakes on air, you know, particularly identification, pronunciation. It's tough. It's, 90 minutes of commentating. It's tough. It's not easy. You are going to make mistakes. And I think you must accept that you're going to make mistakes. You got to just, the secret is to try and minimize them, or to, hopefully mask them so the public doesn't pick them up. But yeah, it's not easy. You say taking rejection. The next question is, during your lecture, you said take whatever rejection, but keep coming back. Did you personally experience such rejection, and how did you handle them? I've got to be honest with you. I've had a lot of luck in my career. I've had people who've helped me along the way, but I have had times where I've been trying to get certain jobs and not been lucky enough or fortunate enough to get them. And I've just found, you got to just keep knocking on the same door. You'll get a sense of the mood as well of the people you're dealing with. They sometimes, if they really don't want you, maybe you should walk away. But I think most times you can persuade people with enough keenness and energy and enthusiasm. It's very difficult to turn away someone who's enthusiastic and is really determined. So, excuse me again. Yeah, I've had a few of those, and that's why I say to you, I think you just got to keep plugging away. Most exhilarating match you have ever covered. I think I mentioned a few there. What makes a good sports presenter like Carol Shabalala? That again, Christina, I would say is the way you talk to the camera. And it really is a skill. And I'm not sure how they learnt it. Thomas Malambo is a good example. Robert Marawa. That guy, please forgive me, I don't know his surname, Charles, a Nigerian guy with a gray beard who works sometimes for Supersport. Somebody help me with the surname. You guys know who I'm talking about.
Charles
Yes, I mean that guy is he's got a beautiful way of talking to the camera. He really is talented, and it's a bit, in my opinion, it's a bit God-given. It's a God-given talent, but he has a command. He's relaxed. He's talking to you like you are the only one. But if you actually are in a television studio and you see how tough it is, you know, it's you literally surrounded by spotlights, cold camera in front of you, and to be able to treat that as if it was a person, and to be warm and caring and come across with the vivaciousness that someone like Carol Shabalala comes across with, it's really it's a skill. And I admire those people. There are very few of them who do that with such talent. You know, these days, I think, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, there are so many presenters particularly on television news. You know, you go to Sky or CNN or BBC or whatever, there's so many different people. And there are a lot of average guys, average broadcasters and reporters in the field. And there are some just a little notch above. And I think a lot of it's got to do with a rapport with the camera. And that's what makes Carol so good. I mean, she has a way of dealing with the camera that's pretty unique. It also helps, of course, that she's a very, very pretty lady, but she really is super talented in the way that she can deliver. It's, as I say, it's very, very tough. I mean, you're talking to a piece of steel, a camera. It's an ugly looking thing, but yet it's like she's talking to me personally. I'm full of admiration for those wonderful presenters. And then the last question I see here from Daniel is, what are those things you did to keep the fire in media burning? Are you on? Maybe you can explain a bit more what you mean. Are you online? Are you able to maybe just expand a bit on
that? Daniel, please unmute your mic and answer him.
You need to unmute there, Daniel. I don't think Daniel's unmuted.
Daniel. Is it you? Please unmute your mic. Okay, sir.
Excuse me, Mark. Excuse me. I don't know if I can answer my last question before you leave.
Sure.
Okay, Patrick, make it short, please.
Okay, thank you. This question is not really for me, because I'm actually talking on behalf of those young people who are in search of an opportunity. Mark rightly said during his presentation that it's a bit sad because at times we hear foreign voices like British voices commenting African football. And even me as an interpreter, we have the same feeling that at times foreigners come and just pick our jobs. And we see the same thing in football with coaches, where Europeans just come and pick job, whereas we have talented coaches, we have talented commentators. So my question to Mark is, First of all, I want to commend you for thank you for having these brilliant ideas, and also those who made it possible. These lectures, this training session. So my question is, are you going to continue? Do you plan to continue training people? Formally, that is, maybe you can pick some of these guys you would have targeted to be talented, give them all the tools they need, and then give them an opportunity. Maybe you can use your connection for these guys to have an opportunity, and so follow your steps, your steps, because we are all going. We have the younger generation. We have to think of these guys, and so that maybe we can be a kind of role model for them. So that's why I said I'm not talking on my behalf.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
No, thanks, Patrick. I think, first of all, you're giving me a higher status than I have. I'm not a decision maker. I'm also an employee, in that I'm hired to commentate. I'm not at the management level, but I am quite passionate about fighting for the fact that we cannot have Cup of Nations tournaments, Champions League tournaments, that you turn on your television on the weekend to watch Esperance playing against Wydad Casablanca, and you have some guy in a studio in Paris who comes from Britain, who's never probably heard of the two clubs a week before, suddenly now commentating on these games. And that, unfortunately, is the situation at the moment because of the infrastructure of African television. Most of the broadcasting is done in Paris, and it's done by English people who live in Paris. And there's quite a long list of them who get weekend work covering African football or broadcasting on African football. I think it's completely unacceptable. And it's something that I think CAF are aware of now, and I think is going to change. They've had a change themselves, CAF, in terms of their television infrastructure. They're taking a lot more of the television decisions in-house, where previously CAF used to leave television up to a third party. Third party used to do the broadcasting, the filming, and the voice and the captions, etc. And they were usually, or they were almost all exclusively European organizations. So now CAF are taking that stuff in-house. You already saw, I don't know how many of you listened to the Women's Championship in Morocco, but it was a tournament for the first time where we had only African voices. There was a commentator from South Africa and a commentator from Ghana in English. And there was a comments lady from South Africa, and there was a comments lady from Nigeria. She was actually very, very good. A former goalkeeper, I forget her name, but she was interesting. And you could see as the tournament developed as well, how she gained in confidence. In her first few matches, she was a little bit shy and took a while to kind of get into the game. But once she'd done 2 or 3 and she picked up confidence, she really became quite strong as an analyst. And it was very pleasing to hear. And I think CAF were also very pleased with the way these commentators and analysts performed. And I think the way that they're going to go now is in that similar direction. So that's good news for all of us on this continent. And I think obviously with the Super League, when it comes next year, there'll be more television opportunities. And so I think for the top sports broadcasters in Africa, the future looks very, very bright. And opportunities for young up-and-coming people are there. You must know that television is growing. While print and other news and other media is perhaps dying, television is growing. Live television is particularly growing. It's more, live sport on television is what sells ultimately. And the broadcasters, and I know specifically from my own employer, SuperSport, they want as many live games as they can have. That's what people want to see. Documentaries and rebroadcasts and stuff like that is all very nice, but it doesn't have high viewership. Viewership comes from live. People want to watch the game. Tonight's game is who against who? Yeah, I want to watch that. And so there are going to be more and more live matches. More and more live matches means more and more TV personnel, more commentators, more cameramen, more producers, more directors, more sound engineers. There is a growing television industry in Africa with more and more employment opportunities. So those who are interested in doing television broadcasting, I suggest you start brushing up, start getting your act together, start polishing yourself, start working, taking yourself one notch above. Because if you are good, you will be heard, you will be spotted. And while Patrick, I'm not a teacher, and I'm certainly do not see my future in education, I'd be more than happy to advise or to give tips to anyone who would want them from me. It's not difficult to find me, and anyone who is going to has specific questions in broadcasting, I'd be delighted to help them.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Before you go, please, we have Adela Daniel back for her question earlier.
Okay.
Adela Daniel, please unmute your mic.
Good evening, sir.
Hi, good evening.
Yeah, it's a pleasure speaking with you. My question goes like this: as a media personnel, what are those things you did to give you that like in every sector, this time you have this urge to go into a particular thing, like in the banking sectors, people have they have motivation going into it, like in the media now, we all have our motivation, but there will come a time when that's fire you went into it, start doing it. What are those things we can do, or what are those things you did that kept the fire, that kept that hunger in you for job, for the media?
It's a great question, Daniel, and one that is it's tough to answer. Sometimes, the fire is when you look at your bank account and you realize it's very low. That can give you a decent amount of fire. But yeah, I think the joy of the job is possibly the best answer I can give you, and that's I consider myself very, very lucky, very fortunate. I've been blessed by the fact that I'm doing something that I really, really love. I wake up in the morning and I rub my hands together. Okay, what's today? What am I going to do today? What's on my agenda? Oh, yes, I've got to write this article about the World Cup for this guy. I've got to write an interview with Okocha. I'm going to talk to him on the phone today. You can imagine, you've got 5 or 6 of those exciting things to do every day. What a wonderful life. So yeah, the fire burns all the time because I'm really doing what I love. And it's not everybody who gets that opportunity. So you have to be very thankful for that. It's tough out there for people. And if you find yourself in a position where you are being stimulated every day, where your mind is being massaged, where you are having fun, you are in a wonderful place. So I'm lucky. I'm very, very lucky, and I wish that for everybody. I wish everybody gets up in the morning and it's not like, oh God, I have to go to work now. If that's the way you feel, you're in the wrong job. But sometimes circumstance dictates that is the only job that you can get. So we all understand that life is not a bed of roses. But I wish for everybody that they get to a situation where when they wake up in the morning, they go, wow, today is another day and it's an exciting day and I'm about to do this, that, and the next thing, and I'm going to have fun doing it. And it's my sincere wish for everybody, particularly in the media industry, that is how your day is every day, because that's fire. That's what keeps, if you're having fun, that's what keeps you going.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. That will be all from us, except you have something, maybe a summary for us, but that will be all from us. We thank you very much for your outstanding teachings today. We learned a lot, especially me though. I learned a lot from you, sir.
No, that's very kind of you. I would just want to wish you all well. I would want to encourage those of you who are wanting to go into broadcasting to realize now we're on the cusp of exciting times, you know. And I would also like to tell you that you are going to come across obstacles. Not every day is going to be a wonderful day. You've just got to plug on. You've got to keep pushing. You've got to put it behind you and move on. You know, there is good opportunity ahead in the African broadcasting space. So seize the opportunities and if I could just wish all of you the best of luck in that direction, because if you can, as I said to Daniel, if you can be fulfilled in what you do every day and enjoy what you do, you are going to have a good, healthy, and happy life. And that's the best that we can wish for anybody. So that is my parting remark to you. Thank you very much, all of you, for your kindness in all your questions and for your courtesies, etc. And yeah, best of luck to all of you. May you all prosper well. And I hope that some of the names that I've seen here today, I will hear your voices and see your names in lights in the coming years.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. That'll be all from us, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Cheers. Good night and have a great weekend.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you and God bless you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
God
you.
bless you, sir.
All the best. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Okay, to everyone, please, I hope you have a wonderful class today. I hope you all
Thank
have a
you.
wonderful class today.
Yes, best man. Yes, best man, we did.
Yes.
Is it
We
possible
did,
to have the recording, please?
We should.
Because I missed
Yes,
the beginning of. I missed the beginning of
Yes,
the.
yes, Patrick. We'll have the recording in our YouTube channel, please. Are you in our group?
No, I'm not in the group. I mean, I just picked the thing is that African, how do you call it, inside African football.
Okay, how do you get the link for this meeting, please?
I think it's somebody. I think Oga Sami Wegina, right?
Yes,
Sami Wegina.
Yes. You could DM him. You could DM him, please, for the recording.
Okay, he's the one who sent me because we are part of the same group. The group is named Inside African Football.
Okay, you could DM him for.
Yeah, Mark is even part of
for
that
the
group.
recording.
Okay, I'll call him.
Okay.
Okay, thank you
Hello.
so much.
Yes, no, see, I'm here. Okay. Oh, we should
Unfortunately, it seems your mic, your network is having small issues. Okay, but let me just help you from here. I think we are through with this class and we know our custom to do our assignments and everything. Class captain, don't forget to drop the attendance. Okay, so I think that would be all.
Please. So, can I say something?
Okay, you can go ahead.
Hello, can anyone hear me? Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, we hear you.
Concerning the person that was asking up. Yes, sorry, I'm Emeka Tonye, yeah. And concerning the lady that was asking about where to get start from and all of that, I think the platform where you can get start from, maybe like SofaScore and some other websites that you can get first-hand and listen start from whenever you're coming in again. So that's what I just have to say.
Okay, we've heard. Maurice Victoria, please, you have the permission to end this meeting.
All right. Okay, have a nice day, everybody.
Thank
See you
you.
in class.
In class?
Yes,
Hello?
in class on the WhatsApp platform.
Why don't you? Okay, that's why that my friend was asking if I'm part of the group, right?
Yes.
So maybe you can put me in the group. Do you also accept Francophones there in that your group?
Yes, you can join the group, but since you can reach Oga Sami, then you just let him know and he will add you to the group.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right.
I'll tell them I'm coming on behalf of Maurice and Victoria, right?
Okay. That will be okay.
Thank you, Victoria. Bye.
All right, bye. All right, Fortune and others, see you in class. Bye.
Bye.